The human being is not an object. Originally, the human being has neither owner nor utility, but is a contingent being. Conversely, the object always has an owner and a utility. The human being initially may be defined as the opposite of the object, i.e., as a conscious and dignified being, a contingent being that has no owner and no predefined utility. To assign an owner to the human being and to define the latter by usefulness is to modify the original definition of the human being, to consider the human being as an object. The human being is a conscious, dignified, and exceptional being, worthy of respect as such. All human beings are equally worthy, regardless of their biological, social, or psychological affiliations. Making a human being the property of another, the state or society, is morally unacceptable, and even a human being with no use is a dignified being. To dispose of one's life is to have no owner, and therefore to be able unconditionally to do what one wants with one's body, to do what one wants with one's life, to be in control of oneself. The expression to dispose of one's life means life in the biological sense, in the sense of body. From a humanist point of view, it would be aberrant to subject a conscious and worthy being, the human being, to a non-conscious and immoral reality like biology. It is not consciousness that must submit to biology, but biology that one must submit to consciousness. In other words, it is ethically legitimate for the human being to dispose of their own life. For example, even if human beings are biologically programmed to reproduce, to have a certain gender and to live, they do not have the moral duty to procreate, to be heterosexual, not to change their gender, and to live. Biology does not take the place of ethics. The human being is alone, so I cannot know others and others cannot know me. Loneliness is the fact of being the only one to be oneself. No one is in my place. No one can know what I think and feel. No one can live in my place, enjoy my place, suffer in my place, and die in my place. Nobody can know what is good for me, what makes me happy. At the same time, no one is able to know if my suffering is bearable or not. As a result, nobody has the legitimacy to rule my life for my own good, and to decide for me whether my life is worth living or not. The right to painless suicide is therefore a consequence of the acceptance of philosophical solitude. To live with dignity through universal income, to die with dignity through the right to painless suicide. Capitalists, by externalizing their social and ecological costs, actually cost the state more than the so-called assisted living on a minimum income. Through universal income, even the weak who are not able to work could live with dignity. If the state prohibits the means of painless suicide, it is not out of love, but to keep us in its power. Life is not a sect, so we should be able to get out of it whenever we want. Learning to die, when we have accepted our mortality and are able to commit suicide without pain, we are no longer afraid of dying, so we can more easily escape from horrible situations that are not in accordance with our dignity, or even ethically dishonorable. Given that we did not ask to be born, the least we can do is that we are not forced to live, but we are asked for our opinion. Suicide is never a cause, but a consequence. So the solution to fight against suicide is never to prevent it, but to make life better so that we no longer wish to commit suicide. We are all responsible for the sufferings of the dying. We are mortal, since death is inevitable. Not making it serene when we have the means to do so is outrageous. And when a person requests a gentle death, not granting their request is cruel. Similarly, don't all those who commit suicide deserve a merciful death? Some may commit suicide wrongly, but for their dignity to be respected, it is always preferable that they commit suicide gently rather than in pain. Since it is possible to soften the death, we all have blood on our hands. If people here and now die in pain, we are responsible. We could humanize their death, but we choose not to. Living anyway, despite the pain, only makes sense if the decision is a personal one and not a social one. Only the freedom to die serenely when we decide to do so makes sickness and old age bearable. Without the taste of freedom, life is worse than death. Hence, the urgency of the right to euthanasia and assisted suicide for all adults.